What is going on, Diablo 2 fans? Dobrunsky here. In today's video, I want to break down what I think is one of the most confused builds ever in Diablo 2, and that is the Summoning Druid build. Now, it is true that the build is actually viable compared to what it was prior to some of the updates in D2R, but it is just such a confused build because I've never seen something require such high-end expensive gear and have relatively poor clear speed compared to other meta builds, but at the same time having so much potential damage with all your summons added up. It's just a very interesting conundrum in my opinion, but the build does excel in two areas: PvP type of gameplay that I don't actually dabble in too much, but also targeting champions and boss packs. But in terms of actual general clear speed, like clearing Chaos Sanctuary, the build is actually horrible. So I want to do a detailed breakdown today, testing a very high-end variant of the Summoning Druid, followed by a budget variant, and then again comparing to other common meta builds, and then wrap up the video by talking about some potential tweaks that would maybe improve the Summoning Druid. But before I do that, I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is like combining AAA game mechanics with unlimited character customization and then cramming it down into a phone. It is a revolutionary gaming experience. So what makes Raid Shadow Legends so revolutionary, and why should you actually play it? Well, the first reason is it is a completely free to play game. You do not have to invest anything to get started in Raid Shadow Legends today. 2, you can play at your own pace. Everybody from the casual player to the dedicated player can have fun playing Raid Shadow Legends. And 3, finally, the biggest one for me, is there is endless content with new champions and game updates every single month. You will never get bored playing Raid Shadow Legends. And this month, Raid's got a huge new update with a ton of new features, including a brand new dungeon and the introduction of Artifact Ascension. Battle through the Sand Devil's Necropolis and earn the precious oil you need to make your artifacts to get to the next level. There are a bunch of new champions added to the mix too, including some really cool holiday champions for those looking to get in the festive spirit. The Bastion's even been decorated in-game to look all wintry as well. Raid also has something extra special happening now. They've released a legendary champion based off of MMA and pro wrestling legend Ronda Rousey. Yes, the Ronda Rousey. You can get Ronda for free right now, whether you're a new player or a longtime player. Just by logging into Raid, all you have to do is log in and play Raid for 7 days between now and February the 20th, and Ronda's yours. That's all there is to it. Just enter code RAIDRONDA in-game and all of these goodies can be yours. Also, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get your exclusive rewards in Raid right now. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, click my link in the description or scan the QR code here on the screen. You'll get unique bonuses worth $30. We're talking a free champion, Vergus, 200k silver, 1 energy refill and 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in-game. All of this treasure will be waiting for you here. And thanks again, Raid Shadow Legends, for sponsoring today's video. So I want to first kick off this video by talking about some of the pros followed by the cons associated with Summoning Druid, because it's not all doom and gloom, even though the title of this video might make it sound like that, but it does have a couple distinct advantages. And the first major one compared to the Summon Necro is that you don't require corpses to summon your pets. This is an advantage if you're cycling games. You're not stuck going to Elderton Shank or Neilfax Temple to get your summons like you would with the Summon Druid. It's definitely a nice quality of life feature. Second major pro is that the build is relatively safe to play for players that are on a budget. You might not have Enigma, you don't have very good gear, you just kind of hang back behind your summons, make sure you have mana to cast your summons, and then re-summon them as they die. And the last major pro is that with very high-end gear, it's an effective single target tele-stomping build. That's why it excels so much in PvP, as well as niche magic finding scenarios, like if you're farming the pits and you want to just tele-stomp from monster to monster. It's actually really good in those 2 specific applications. Now, as far as the cons go for the Summon Druid, the first major one, and I cannot stress this enough, full clear speed, if we're doing a full cow clear or full chaos clear, is exceptionally poor. Even with the best possible gear, it's not even close to some of the meta builds. And again, I don't necessarily expect a Summon Druid to be a Jabazon, but the lack of AoE is just so apparent with this build. It's a very poor clear speed build, which you'll see when I jump into some of the comparative data tests later on in this video. And the second major con, in my opinion, is that the build is boring to play. After I had collected all the background footage to use in this video, I had pretty much had enough of playing the Summon Druid. Like, I can just say that right off the bat, the build is exceptionally boring compared to playing something like the Fire Druid, which was tele-stomping, making sure I had active Armageddon, and then casting Firestorm, you know, Volcano, Fissure in different locations. That was a fun, dynamic build to play. The Summon Druid is the total opposite of that. Just pure boring tele-stomping disaster. So for reference, this is my Summon Druid, which before I jump into the gear, I want to give a huge shout out to my Discord moderator Zez, as well as community member Lord Beast, who donated the gear to make this essentially as close to perfect Summoning Druid for some testing online. So again, the gear is very high end, but the budget version I will be swapping out gear, so I'll be removing the Torch and Annie, the Skillers. I'll replace Beast with Hodo to try and represent more of a budget-oriented summoning druid. But to jump into the gear, for the weapon, Beast in a Twin Axe for that Fanaticism Aura. I have a 3 summoning skills, 20 FCR, 2 open socket circlet that I put 2 runes for res. You could use Ravenlore to boost your ravens higher, or maybe like a +5 to summon Grizzly Pelt, I guess, if you wanted to. But I felt like getting the additional 3 skills to the Spirit Wolves, the Dire Wolves, the Bear, and Heart of the Wolverine was better than just boosting the ravens even higher using Ravenlore. The Amulet is a 3 to summoning skills, 10 FCR Magic Amulet. Then I have a 35 FCR Spirit, Enigma, Arachnid's Mesh, 2 BK Rings, Mage Fist, Sandstorm Trex. Offhand, I have a 2/6/2 CTA, a Spirit, and then I have different assorted summoning skillers with plus life, different assorted resistant small charms, and then a Druid, Torch, and an Annie. And the Mercenary is an Act 2 Nightmare Might Aura Mercenary. He's using Reaper's Toll with an Ohm Rune, Fortitude, and then Indariel's Visage with a max damage 30 fire res jewel. Now, a lot of people might point out, why are you using Reaper's Toll and why aren't you using Pride instead? There is the argument to make that the Raven's blind on hit will override Decrep, but it doesn't happen as frequently as what you would think, at least it didn't in my testing. And then I felt like just the source of Life Leech compared with Life Leech with the helmet, and having high-end damage, like he has, I think, 12,000 damage, versus Pride, he would be sitting around maybe like maximum 4,000 damage, and then it would boost the summons a bit, where I feel like the strongest summon out of the summon druids is actually the Mercenary. So that's the reason why I went with Reaper's Toll instead of Pride. So that's essentially a full breakdown of the character. So I'm going to jump to some testing where I'm going to be doing Players 1 Chaos Sanctuary with the best possible gear, and then a budget-oriented version, and then we're going to compare the clear speed times, and then we will follow that up with a tele-stomping hit example run as well. So the Players 1 difficulty, full clear Chaos Sanctuary run with the best possible gear, netted a time that I think is honestly pretty poor. So trying to do my best and tele-stomp on individual monsters and constantly repositioning the summons and supporting them again with Fanaticism Aura, Might Aura, Decrep procs, and all the best possible plus skill gear, netted me an average run of about 4 minutes and 6 seconds. Again, this was on Players 1 difficulty with the very best gear. So to put that into perspective, in a recent video where I tested some of the top melee builds on Players 3 difficulty, running around as a Fury Druid, not having access to Enigma, I netted an average run speed of 4 minutes and 4 seconds, again on Players 3 difficulty. So we're not even really on par with a melee character that can't tele-stomp. The average Summon Druid gear test was essentially more of the same, so I replaced Beast with Hodo, I removed Reaper's Toll for an Inside Mercenary, removed all Skillers, Torch and Annie, and just left Enigma and some of the other basic plus skill gear. I even removed the BK Rings to try and emulate a relatively budget character, even though a lot of people will say, well, Enigma isn't truly budget, and I do agree with you, but the results would be a lot slower if I didn't even include Enigma. So again, with average-based gear, Players 1 difficulty, I had about 5 minutes and 35 second runtime, which again I think is substantially worse than the next to perfect gear Summon Druid that I just covered. So to put things into perspective, I completed a Players 1 difficulty Chaos Sanctuary run with an average Necro. The only really good piece of gear was Enigma, but again that was to match the budget test and the high-end variants of the Summon Druid because both of those had Enigma. And I ended up with an average clear speed of 3 minutes and 5 seconds in Chaos Sanctuary. So we're talking over a full minute faster than basically a perfect geared Summon Druid. There's a huge disparity and difference there. And lastly, I'd like to at least highlight an area that I think the Summon Druid excels at, and that is tele-stomping champions and boss packs in low monster difficulty areas and just focusing on stacking as much Magic Find as you can. So I ran a setup that had comfortably 350 MF and could be upwards of almost 500 with perfect in-slot gear like Isterns in the helmet, switching out to War Travs, but all MF small charms netted me a clear speed time of about 1 minute and 12 seconds, focusing only on champions and boss packs in the pits. So this is relatively respectful in my opinion if you want to make a solely dedicated magic finding Summon Druid. So where does this testing lead us? What conclusions can we ultimately draw about the Summon Druid? Well, in my opinion, I don't think damage is the issue, because if you add up the Mercenary, the Ravens, all of your Wolves, and your Bear, the sheer damage from a single telestomp is absolutely insane. It's probably why the build excels so much in PvP, but I think it largely suffers from an area of effect source of damage, so maybe you could address this by possibly adding corpse explosion effect to the direwolves consuming corpses. I'm not really sure. I definitely don't think that adding more damage is the solution to the summon druid, but it's definitely, in my opinion, a subpar build. Is it possible to please the PvM and PvP communities at the same time? Probably not. That's something that's very difficult to do in my opinion, but ultimately I think that the Summon Druid needs something a little bit extra. I think the clear speed on players 1 difficulty was exceptionally poor with some of the very best possible gear, especially when you compare it to lower end variants that don't have insane plus skillers and just everything else. The build is definitely viable now, but I definitely think that it's lacking. At least that's my humble opinion. Again, sound off in the comment section below if you guys agree, disagree, chime in, add anything that you think that I potentially did not include in this video, or maybe you just think that the Summon Druid is fine. We should just leave it as is and nothing changes, and it's just honestly a build that 99.98% of players will not play. That is always an option too. Does it really speak to a greater core issue that Diablo 2 has when there's really only a small select handful of builds that are really ever used, and everything else is just a marginalized, not very often played build? Like, I don't really know what the answer is, so that's why I'd like to hear from you guys. Other than that, hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, if you could throw a like on it, that'd be awesome. I'll catch you guys on my next video or live stream. Peace out.